There we go. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. And anyone that's watching on a recorded video, I hope this is a really valuable session for you related to EDS or hypermobility syndrome and the challenges that can come up when we're trying to do disability. Um, Today, we have a guest speaker with us. Ellen is here with us, and she did a video with me and Dr. Eric Singman a few months ago. And then I invited her to come back and talk more specifically about, the appeal process. When you get a disability letter, that kind of rocks your world and, where do you go and what can you do? Ellen has founded her own consulting firm after being with the most, uh, what is it? The most, not popular is the word, the most utilized
Mhm.
Virginia law firm. Um, she was there with them and she was the department head for the disability appeals. And so she's looked at hundreds and hundreds of letters and advised tons of people on what to do. And she's a friend to EDS. So thank you so much for being here, Ellen. Um, with that introduction, I'll let you kind of go through and then we'll do some Q&A. And does that sound good?
Sure, that sounds super, Christy. Thank you
Great.
very much, and thanks for
Yeah.
having me back.
Yeah.
I do enjoy talking to the community and trying to get the word out about how to make your claim as strong as possible if you do need to make a claim. Um, and I'll just clarify, I'm not an attorney. I started working for an attorney maybe about 7 years ago after I retired from the Navy. I was an intelligence officer in the Navy. And we started out as a very small team. I was the only person supporting an attorney. Together we just sort of figured out how to process more and more of these cases. And we grew so big after 7 years that they were able to hire a new attorney. And at that time, it was a good time for me to start pursuing the one thing that had always hadn't been able to find a way around, which is, Anne, you've alluded to, when we had potential clients who would come to us, they had to meet a threshold level of case value in order for it to make any sense for us running a business as a law firm to help them. And it was, well over half the people who came to us needing some help with their claims that we just were not able to help. And I kept over the years trying to find, if it's not us, like who can help them, and couldn't come up with anybody in all those years. So, it seemed a good time. Well, nobody's doing it, so why don't I see if I can do it? Um, and so, yeah, wrote the book about, really how to appeal your disability insurance case. And I try to go through, from if you are acting in your own capacity, you don't have a representative, how would you do that? How would you go step by step, and, things to look out for, and launched a website. And then what we're doing now, me and my colleague Jenny Kaprowski, um, is people, when you get to the end of my book, you're either thinking, all right, good, I can go on and do this myself, or you're thinking, I now have all this information. I now have a denial letter. Like, how do I really apply the general information to my specific situation? And that's where, if it makes sense for you in your claim, you can contact us, and we can help walk you through the appeals process. And yeah, so far it's been going great. We've been taking clients for 3 months now, and our problem is just finding enough hours in the day to get to
I
everybody.
was going to say get
Um,
flooded. Yeah.
yeah, for sure. So I will talk as much as people want to about the appeals process, but I also wanted to start out. I thought we could spend some time talking about the claims process, because it's always preferable. Christy, you hit the nail on the head when you said, when people are looking for this type of information about their disability appeal, they're in panic mode because they're already looking at a denial letter that nobody is, very few people are expecting to have their claim denied. Gets denied, the clock is ticking. They have to figure out who to talk to, what to do. It's a completely new world that they, weren't even anticipating being in. So as much as possible, if we can keep people out of that world and, give them some information when they're first starting to make a claim, that's a lot preferable so that they never get to the denial stage. And a lot of the things are similar, right? Like if you know how to make a strong claim, you also have the tools that you need to file a strong appeal if that becomes necessary. There's a lot of overlap. So let me just run through. I have on the side of my screen, I've got an outline that I'll just run through about, sort of the universe that we're talking in right now. There's so much to consider when you're facing the possibility of not being able to go back to work. You have to look at what kind of assistance is available to you. And that's going to depend on kind of your work history, and then what your employer offers. So the two main types of disability insurance, disability assistance are going to be Social Security disability that you are eligible for because you've paid into Social Security. Normally it's about 10 years or 40 quarters of work will make you eligible for SSDI. And then there's another type of insurance that's offered through some employers. Not all employers offer it. They're not required to offer it, but often as an employee benefit, especially larger employers do offer group disability insurance. And you'll be eligible for that often simply by virtue of being an employee. You're eligible. And sometimes it's provided for you, paid 100% by your employer as a benefit. Sometimes it's just provided to you as an option for you to buy into and pay the premiums every month, usually through your paycheck. So the first thing is to know which you have. Are you covered by Social Security? You can go to ssa.gov and sign on there for you start an account, and it will tell you there whether your earnings report will tell you whether you're eligible for SSDI, or how many quarters you've worked and what you have left to go to be eligible for that. And then to know whether you have it through your work, if you haven't been paying attention, it would be just talk to HR and ask, hey, I'm figuring out what our benefit package holds. Does it include disability insurance? There's a third option, usually for people who are exceptionally high earners because the premiums are pretty high. You can buy your own disability insurance policy. And then you would simply just go to an insurance broker and tell them this is a policy you want to look into purchasing, get a quote, pay the premiums, and usually it is the higher compensated individuals that do this, doctors, lawyers. I've seen some nurses, anybody who has a significant amount of income that's not going to be covered by a group disability policy, who needs to supplement that. Because group disability policies usually only cover about 60% of your income. Every policy is different, but that's sort of the most standard amount. So you're going to find out if you're covered, first of all, talk to your employer. You're going to find out what that coverage entails. Do you have a short-term disability policy only? Short-term disability policy is going to cover you for the first maybe 3 to 6 months is common if you're not able to work. And then after that term of short-term disability, you may have a long-term disability policy that will pick up where that leaves off. And that long-term disability will usually cover you through to retirement age. But it is time limited. It's not like Social Security, which will cover you until for the rest of your life. Disability policies usually only cover you until retirement age. But all disability policies are different. You'll get tired by the end of this presentation of hearing me say normally, usually, in most cases. It's because every policy is different. And some of them are different in ways that I can't predict right now. I've just they're like fingerprints, kind of general similarities that we can talk to, but you have to look at your own policy to know what specifically applies to you. All right, so we've figured out you are one of the people who has short-term disability and long-term disability. The next thing you want to do is get a copy of that policy, especially if you think you might be making a claim, and you have to read it. And there are some basic things that you want to understand when you're going through your policy. You want to understand, first of all, whether you're covered and what the terms of the coverage are going to be. Sometimes you're covered just, day one, you start employment and you're covered by this policy, especially if your employer pays for the coverage. Sometimes you have to enroll in order to be covered, and that's usually if you're the one who's paying the premium for the policy. Some of them I've seen start, at the first full calendar month after you become employed. Some are a few months out, but it'll say specifically in your policy when you become covered. And also the terms of coverage are important. How many hours a week do you have to work to be covered? The worst situations we see are when somebody is trying to work with a disability, which is very, very common. And one of the ways that they try to keep working is by reducing their work hours. HR usually does not understand the specific terms of their policy. And so it is possible that they make an accommodation to drop you below the number of hours that are required for you to be covered by the policy. And then that just sets up a fight with the insurance company over whether you are covered at all. It puts you into arguing that, well, you were disabled way back when you first started reducing your hours. And it's just something that you want to be aware of, and it's better to make a claim before you drop your number of hours below the minimum required to be covered by the policy.
That's a really, really important point. I appreciate you bringing that out.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't mean to interrupt you, but
No, go ahead.
for people that are still working and trying to make it work, getting accommodations, maybe the pandemic helped them be able to be remote more, which might help more. Because like when I went on disability, my corporation that I worked for, suggested that I get a cot in my office so that I could lay down when I had POTS flares and was having, passing out from syncope.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, that's not going to work. But yeah, anyway, if they'd reduce your
Thanks for that
hours to
concern.
whatever, say it's like under 35 hours a week, they helped you, but they also hurt you. So yeah, really good
Yeah,
point.
correct.
Sorry to
Yeah.
interrupt. Go ahead.
No, I appreciate the interruption. I can talk about this stuff all day, and I tend to monologue, and there's so many different directions, and so anytime that you have a question, I saw a question pop up, but I was too quick to get to it. So Christy, if you want to help moderate for me,
Yeah,
and
I
we
will when we get out. Go ahead and finish your kind of like
okay,
intro, and then I'm happy to help moderate.
okay, super, thank you. Um, All right, so I think we've talked about everything you need to know, which is, are you covered, and get a copy of your policy, and read that. The point I brought up a couple of times about it, a lot depends on who's paying for your benefits. The other important thing to understand about that, not just that you may have to enroll and pay premiums in order to be covered, but on the other end, when you're receiving benefits, if you were the one paying the premium with your post-tax dollars, your employer paid you, took out taxes, and then on top of that, they took out, $7 a month for disability, LTD coverage, whatever it is. Your benefit is tax-free. You do not pay taxes on the benefit amount that you get from the insurance company. Um, if the employer paid the premium and it was free to you to have this coverage, you just had it by virtue of being an employee. If you then if you make a claim, receive benefits, the benefits that you receive, you will pay taxes on those, depending on where your tax bracket is, will determine the amount. But it's one, more sophisticated, like down the line look. If you have the option to pay the premium or have your employer pay the premium, it may be worth having that money taken out of your paycheck, in order to have a tax-free benefit if you have to make a claim. All right, so you are covered by a policy. You've talked to your employer. You've gotten a copy of the policy. What are some of the things you're looking for? The definition of disabled is an important one, and it changes for most policies. They'll cover you for a period of time if you can't work in your own occupation. And then after that period of time, 2 years is the most common. Then you're only covered if you can't work in any occupation at all, that is suitable for your training and experience. And that overlaps a little bit with Social Security. Social Security disability only pays if you're unable to work in any occupation that they deem you qualified for. So it can be easier in the beginning to get approved for long-term disability benefits, especially if your own occupation, was maybe more physically demanding, and you have a condition, that restricts you from performing the physical demands of your occupation. One thing that you also want to look out for and be aware of is the pre-existing condition exclusion, because everybody gets the policy. When they get covered by a policy, by definition, they are working. And so they'll work for a period of time before they are unable to continue working and go out on disability. Every policy has a period of time. 1 year is very common, although it's not true for every policy, but we'll take 1 year as an example because that's the most common. If you go out of work within 12 months of being employed, that triggers a pre-existing condition look back into your medical records. And there's a period of time that the insurance company, disability insurance company, will then go and look back to see if you had this condition. And every definition is different. In some policies, something might be considered a pre-existing condition if you just show symptoms of it. In other policies, you have to have a diagnosis for it. They're kind of all over the map. Those look back periods are different. I've seen 3 months is very common. I've seen 6 months and 12 months. Another thing to understand about pre-existing condition clauses is that sometimes they exist in long-term disability policies, but they did not exist in your short-term policy. So you went out of work, you were covered for short-term disability, you got paid benefits for the first 3 to 6 months, whatever your STD period was, and then you think you're going to have this smooth transition to long-term disability because your disability is not in question, but instead you get a denial letter because it was a pre-existing condition. And the hardest thing with a condition like EDS that, you were working with it and then it gradually, usually it's gradually just became harder and harder until you're not able to maintain employment anymore. There's sort of a gray area where, we see people go out of work, weeks to a month or so before when that pre-existing exclusion period would have ended. You would have gone over a year of employment and there would have been no look back. You could have a pre-existing condition, but as long as you make it through the first year of work or whatever's in your policy, you're covered if you don't have to stop working. So that's a huge one to look for.
Yeah, so I'm sorry to interrupt you again.
Okay.
that brings up the point of, people that might be watching this are in that, gosh, I'm working, what do I do? They don't know where to go or where to get advice. And, what you're saying about, number one, find out what, your coverage is. Number two, get the policy, because you read that and then you could know like one little snafu like that, if you had waited an extra, 6 months or 30 days or whatever it was, that
Yeah.
your pre-existing condition would go away, so it's really down to a lot of minutia of the policy. So yeah, getting that and understanding it, or even getting someone like you to help understand, the ramifications of all the decisions, even before you decide to stop working, is
Mhm.
critical. Yeah.
Yeah, it is absolutely. Um, you're also going to look when you're looking at your policy and you're trying to figure out plan, how much potential income you could have coming in. You want to look at the section that talks about offsets for other income. um, the system at large is set up, unless you've bought your own private disability insurance, it's set up so that you can never take in more by being disabled than you could while you were working. And in practice, it rarely even gets close to 100%. Most disability policies will cover you a percentage of your income. 60% is pretty common. And the hardest thing that we have to tell people sometimes is, when they're doing their own calculations, they think, all right, I've got this 60% policy from my employer. Social Security disability is going to pay me something, and when I add these together, I'll be okay. But virtually all your group disability insurance policies, yeah, you're shaking your head, virtually all those group policies have an offset for other income clause where they reduce your benefit by the amount that you're receiving in Social Security disability. So you can get up to 100% of that LTD benefit, but you cannot add to it. One thing that's important for a condition like EDS, like POTS, is that a lot of policies have limitations on what they call subjective symptoms. So if you're disabled by pain, which is considered a subjective symptom, and sometimes they will enumerate what the subjective symptoms are: pain, musculoskeletal conditions that aren't, you can't x-ray somebody to see what's going on with their muscles. There'll be a limitation of maybe, 2 years is common, sometimes 5 years for coverage for those conditions. And the insurance company is saying, look, even if you are disabled at the end of the year, your policy, at the end of that period, your policy ends, and you're not covered, even if you are still disabled. So as you're kind of projecting out what kind of coverage and security you're going to have, those are important clauses to look for. All right, let's get into, if there are any questions about policies or what to look for in your policy. Just jump in with those anytime, but I'll move on to the clause that usually causes everybody the most headaches, which is proof of claim. Is probably what it's going to say in the policy. There'll be a section called proof of claim. And maybe my next book will be called Proof of Claim, because it's everything about your disability claim. It's not just having a disability, it's proving that you have a disability. And those things can be different. And first, you need to understand 100% of the time, in all the policies I've ever seen, the burden is on you to prove your claim. And legally that matters. Or you're always, is it the insurance company's responsibility to prove that you are not disabled? No, it never is. It's always your responsibility to prove that you are. They often will try to help you by assigning a claim manager who will request your medical records from your doctors, who will be a liaison with your employer to get the employment information they need. But if they are not having any luck, you can't step out of that equation. It's ultimately you are the one who is going to suffer. Your claim will suffer if you can't provide that proof. It's always your burden. Um, the other thing to understand about proof of claim, and Christie, I think EDS sufferers are going to be particularly vulnerable to this because you do spend so long, so many years, put so much effort into understanding your disease. You find that few other people, like even in the medical community, really understand all the ins and outs of what you're dealing with. And so by the time you get to the point where you need to make a claim, like you're probably an expert or you're well on your way to becoming an expert. And the temptation is there, and your skills and your knowledge are there to explain your claim to the insurance company. Look, let me explain to you what EDS is. Let me explain to you the manifestation that I have. Let me explain why it's disabling. And that is all important. We call that the context for your claim. It's really important, and that's on you. Like you're providing the context for your claim, but do not confuse that with proof of your claim. You can be completely right about the context and everything you say, but without proof, the insurance company will deny your claim, not because they disagree with you. They're not going to say we disagree with your context. They're not going to say, you're wrong about EDS. They're simply going to say, while your symptoms are appreciated, there is no proof that they rise to the level of being disabled. So that's where you really have to resist the urge to try to be the medical voice for your claim. Even though you could, even though you probably, can teach most doctors. You
Yeah,
have to
yeah.
have,
I would say one of
yeah.
the ways that this really translates, and you're absolutely spot on. We do our research and figure this stuff out, and oftentimes can speak the language better than our doctors can.
Mhm.
But it's critical for your actual medical records, in writing on, my chart or Epic or, the copies that you get, that you have a diagnosis of, Ehlers-Danlos or POTS or dysautonomia, whatever it is. Because I mean, if your doctors haven't noted that in your records, I mean, you can say I have all these symptoms all day long, but it's a hard battle. So sorry, I'm just trying to
Mhm.
reiterate your points.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And there's an associated one with it, which is, so you do have to have the appropriate diagnosis. And you do have to show the treatment and the testing that is commonly associated with that diagnosis. So the evolution of a disability claim, usually when you first go out of work, as long as you have a supportive physician who will say, hey, I've been treating Christy. I think that her condition has risen to the level where it's no longer safe for her to work, or possible for her to work. She's having these symptoms that prevent her from working. She's POTS and she has to lie down and put her feet up, 6 times a day for 30 minutes at a time. And that's incompatible with a job. Whatever the reason is, usually just the fact that you went to see a doctor who agrees that there's, more to figure out here, that can be enough to get your claim approved initially. Not always. I've seen insurance companies do terrible things with initial claims, but often, the next step is where people get confused. They say, this is what I gave them for my claim, and they approved it, and now why I'm giving them the same stuff 6 months later, and they are disproving it, or disallowing. And the reason is that they want to give you, ostensibly, they say they're giving you time to investigate your condition, you and your doctor. But that means if POTS is suspected, okay, what are you doing? Are you referred for a tilt table test? Are you referred to a cardiologist? Have you had testing that documents, the change in heart rate, when you're sitting down, standing up, change in blood pressure, all of those? That you don't need them for day one of your claim, but you probably do need them for 6 months from now. So, and again, like as your doctors start ruling things out, you need to be able to show that nobody's giving up yet. That if the primary care physician couldn't figure it out and the cardiologist says, yeah, you have some features of POTS, but it's not POTS. Have you seen a rheumatologist, to discuss joint issues? Have you had genetic testing for EDS? There's a checklist, I think in your book is great about that, Christie, of kind of walking people through all the different types of tests and specialists and treatments. The insurance company is looking for that to see that you're making progress and trying to figure out the only thing they care about, which is not what your diagnosis is. They're trying to figure out, like, when will you be back to work? Like, how can you get treated so that you can get back to work? And at each stage, when you see a new doctor, it's important for them to either support your claim and say, I am a specialist in EDS. I've seen hundreds to thousands of these cases over the years, and yours is severe enough that I do believe, in my medical opinion, you're not able to work. You need that from your specialist, or you need them to say, we have ruled out any condition that I'm able to treat for, but I am referring you on to the next specialist, back to your primary care. I don't doubt the symptoms that you're having. You need to be assessed by a different type of specialist. So you're always trying to build that record of, even if they're not finding anything, even if you don't have, an approved, a formal diagnosis yet, that you're pursuing it very diligently, and your doctors want to try to get you back to work. I'll move on to sort of the next problem that we see with that, is that even when you do have a diagnosis, you've seen all your specialists, they've figured out, they've done the testing, you have Ehlers-Danlos, you have elements of POTS, dysautonomia, whatever the full syndrome is, you've got all those pieces documented. The next problem that your claim can run into, we call it the most people problem and the some people problem. It's a diagnosis that is not universally disabling. And because it's not universally disabling, the insurance company loves to say by default that then it's not disabling for you. I love the denial letters that say, well, exercise is recommended in cases, like this, to, more activity is better for you. And that's not true either, because even if most people are not disabled by a diagnosis, by definition, some people are. And so what we want to do is clearly document that you are in the some people are category. And there are some good ways to do that. One is to, this is a tall ask for some people, but to see a specialist in EDS, in POTS. I think it's getting better, right? There are more doctors available, who understand the condition and can speak to it, and have seen, more importantly for the disability claim, is they've seen a lot of people with these symptoms. And so they have the credentials to say, in my medical opinion, based on the hundreds of cases that I have seen, this is one of the most severe that I have seen. These symptoms are less amenable to treatment than some others are. And here's the functional reasons why I don't think that my patient can go back to work. Um, and that last part is really important, is the functional impact of the symptoms. Everybody can have pain, everybody can have headaches, but you need to be able to show the severity of yours and the functional impact. And the best way, I think, also in your book, you talk about keeping a journal, a symptom journal. That's super important to do, especially in cases where there are no, you can't x-ray this, you can't do a blood test for it, for the severity of symptoms anyway. Um, Courts have been pretty clear that in cases where there are no objective tests and there's no objective evidence, that if you can document the subjective symptoms, that also has to be considered. That's the best evidence you're going to get.
Mhm.
So it's
It's
important if you,
it's like really a pain in the butt. I mean, but it's
yeah,
like one of those things to, I mean, if you think you're headed down this path, you have to do it, whether you use like an app, and there's free apps out there, like, I know one for pain is like Flare Down, and you're tracking your medicines and all these other symptoms, and if you're passing out, any of these things, because then you're able to show, look at this data over time
right.
of, and it can tell the story of that critical juncture that you're talking about, that most of us do not understand. What we have to prove is that impact on functionality, so like, just for my example, it was, okay, like, I'm getting in the car and sitting upright in the traffic in DC to get to my office is causing the blood to not flow to my brain, and I'm passing out while I'm driving, you know, like, you know, like, this is happening to me, 6 times a week, or, whatever it is. Um, I mean, but the impact on your ability to function, and like telling that story and alliterating that, um is so much more important than the, like, symptomatic, like, I feel this way and I feel that way, and this is when I'm tired and I can't do this and I can't do that, which is how all of the patients look at it.
Mhm.
We want to go, well, I mean, I can't go to the grocery store, or I can't do that. It's like, you have to be able to really, like, communicate it well.
Yeah, no, 100%. It is. It's important and it is a pain. It's like, you're trading one job for another. It feels like there's just to keep track of it. And the other thing I would add to that is, that's another case where, understand, it's not you, it's your role to maintain the symptom journal, talk about the severity, the frequency, the impact of your symptoms. But then the only thing to do with that is give it to your doctor and let your doctor look at it and record it in your medical record, maybe, include it as a document in your medical record, and have your doctor say, based on the symptoms that she's so diligently recorded, I think she's restricted to 2 hours a day of work, or I think she's going to need a break, 30 minutes at a time, must be able to lie down and put feet up, 3 times a day, whatever it is. Let your doctor talk to the impact on functionality that your symptom journal is reflecting for you. Um, all right, let me see if I've got it. Okay, one more thing to talk about with your doctor is context. Um, it's a journey for them too, right? Like, everybody wants you to get back to, Christy, I keep referring back to your book, but you talked about, like, just, we're trying to get you better, not better, like, objectively in the world, but better for you, better than you were before. Um, and and that's a win. And when you have a win like that, and your pain has decreased or your stamina has increased, it's everyone's natural reaction to kind of celebrate that. And, oh, Christie came in today. She's doing so much better. She feels great. This last intervention, really worked. It was, we're so pleased. If they stop there, it's death for your claim, because the insurance company doesn't care about any context. They're going to take those words in your medical record and say, oh, look, you can go back to work. Your last intervention worked. Like, everything is fixed now. So for your doctor to always be aware, discuss your claim with them, have them say, they can say everything that they said, like, she's doing great. This really worked. We're so happy. Her stamina is so much increased. And then add the context, she's now able to go to the grocery store and walk through. And when she gets back, she only has to nap for 3 hours instead of being wiped out for the entire rest of the day. So give your doctor the context. Like, don't be the patient who wants to go in and, just say, yeah, much better. Like, make sure they know what that means. What does better mean? And make sure they put it in your medical record. Yeah, I think that wraps up everything I had for now, Christy.
All right, great. Well, I had some questions and then I thought we could take a few. I thought we could take a few from the, of course, the people that are on here.
Sure.
So, thank you very much. I mean, this is really helpful and it's one of those things that's really hard to learn how to like speak this language. So having people like you is pretty important. I put another link in the chat, one for like just a little short book that I wrote about this process. I called it something corny, like, the 12 steps of an EDS boot camp, like the things you need to know, like tips from the trenches, because it's hard. I mean, it's really hard in these nuances. And then the other thing that we mentioned that's really helpful for EDS and MCAS and POTS people is the NAS report that Social Security asked be published. And, more than like 25 doctors participated in, and disability advocates like John Rodas, so that it's a really comprehensive report for people to be able to use. So I put that link in there. But let me start with my questions. Some of the, Ellen, can you share some of the insights into kind of the challenges that people with EDS typically face? You mentioned some of it where it's like, there's no measurable test. There's no blood test. Like what are some of the challenges that people run into?
Yeah, I think, they are, challenges whenever you have a condition that, you were able to work with it for a while and now you can't. The biggest challenge is both explaining the context of that. Why were you able to work on Tuesday but not on Wednesday? You have to be able to answer that question, or the insurance company just doesn't get it. They understand car accidents. They understand, things that have a measurable, like, oh, here's why you could work Tuesday and not Wednesday. But if you don't have that built into your claim, you have to be able to explain it. And it has to be backed up by your medical records. So your car accident, you're going to have your ER bids, you're going to have your X-rays, you're going to have, proof of what happened and how severe it was. If you're making a claim based on EDS, you have to have a doctor who says, right, like enough is enough. Like because invariably you've been pushing yourself. It's nobody's first option to stop working. Working is usually the last thing that people give up, and they go through to superhuman lengths to try to keep working. They let everything else fall away so that they can maintain their energy for working. So and the insurance company is just fine with that. They're like, well, that was working for you. Like, why? They don't have any way to understand that you need to give up work to get some time and energy back in your life for a life. That never explain that. That will never go over. They're fine with work being the last thing that you let go of. And so it falls on your doctor to advocate for you and say, even with accommodations, she's just reached the point where this is doing more harm than good for her health. We need her to step back, not have the stress of keeping up, work pace, in order to try to get a handle on some of these symptoms and, resolve them as much as we can.
Yeah,
So that's, yeah, having doctor support and having a reason why you stopped working.
and as you're talking about, many of us, kind of the most typical scenarios, and I'm generalizing, but like maybe young, um, whether it's teenagers or young women, college age, sort of this like onset happens.
Mhm.
Or maybe, you're postpartum or you get a virus, or, there's typically some sort of triggering event that sort of
Mhm.
takes you from you're doing all right to like, oh, I'm not doing all right
Yeah.
anymore. And so being able to demonstrate that, you know, absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah.
All right. So, any suggestions on, how people, whether it's for their own, EDS or for example, like Anne with her child, how can they effectively navigate this appeals process, considering, that they're battling this whole thing with their diagnosis and getting treatment, and then now we're asking them to track their symptoms, and it's like this whole new full-time job, because it's so complex. What are some strategies that you might recommend?
Yeah, it is difficult. At my website, insuranceappealconsultants.com, I have some resources. So I have a free book. If you it's a job, Christy, right? Like there's no way around it. It's going to be hard, and it's going to be hard at a time where you can least afford it. And, even if you have a claim that's a high enough value that you can just turn it over to an attorney, and let them work on it for you, it's still going to be, like at the end of the day, if your doctor was giving the insurance company a hard time about giving records, and then they give your attorney a hard time, like at the end of the day, it's going to be you. Like you're the only one who can go into your doctor and fill out the forms and get the records. You're the only one who can talk to them about your claim and explain what you need. I've sent letters. I now no longer send any letters directly to a doctor because they're never, ever, ever effective. I will give you a letter to take to your doctor explaining exactly what you need. But the only way doctors ever pay attention to them is when they come from their patients. So you're going to be involved to some extent. Um, and you are wise to educate yourself as much as you can about the process, even if you are, if you do decide to hire an attorney and turn everything over to them. You want to know enough to know whether you're getting good service and representation or not. So you have to increase your baseline level of knowledge.
Yeah,
Um,
I know. Like for me, I was more successful in my experiences with my, I mean, you see this whole medical team of specialists, and then
mhm.
you might be fortunate enough to have like a GP that can kind of collect it all, and, maybe they'll write a letter on your behalf or fill out the forms on your behalf. But you're going to the doctor a lot of times to say, okay, I went to see the cardiologist and he said this, and, update my record. And, you're coordinating your
Yes.
own care and going and sitting down with the form from the long-term disability or, whatever is, and, sitting, that's your appointment. You don't
Mhm.
actually have something else to talk about. Your doctor appointment is, we need to do these forms, and it's going to cost a little bit extra. It's going to take an hour instead of 15 minutes, whatever it is. But like, you're having to do that legwork. And that is the kind of stuff that makes a difference of being approved or not approved, in my opinion.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. You're absolutely right. A lot of doctors' offices, will not fill out disability forms. They just say they're too big or too complicated. We have had luck when offices have that policy to ask, well, do you do school and camp physicals? And if you do, can you consider my disability paperwork in that same category if I have to pay you, whatever you charge? Usually they charge for those physical forms.
Yeah, they do.
Pay you $50, $100. It's money well spent. You won't get it back from the insurance company, but it's money well spent.
Yeah.
And then Jenny and I are trying to move into this niche to help people who, maybe don't want to or don't have a case value high enough that they can turn everything over to an attorney to do it for them. But we can help them. We can help, explain why their claim was denied. We can help explain, oh, you did an awesome job with your symptom journal, but you sent it directly to the insurance company. Go back, send it through your rheumatologist, have them comment on it, and that will make a difference. And usually it does. And then we have different tiers too of services that we can provide. But we don't want to spend it, you don't want to spend a lot of money on a claim, that isn't worth very much because it's entirely offset by Social Security. Because although with EDS, you're correct, like most people are younger. But as you get closer to retirement age, the maximum value of your claim just isn't very high anymore. So, there's just all these factors to balance, and we can help make it easier for people. Sometimes a lot easier for people, but if there's no way around, it's going to be hard.
Yeah. Yeah. I have more questions, but let's take some from the audience. I know there's one in the chat already, um, that someone posed. I'm not sure if you can see it, but it's, can you buy your own insurance like after you've been diagnosed with EDS? In the beginning you were talking about you might be able to buy your own policy.
Um, Anybody will sell you anything in general, but the policies that you buy on your own are usually much more expensive. If you are buying one that has evidence of insurability, they'll go back and they'll ask for your medical records, and they'll either exclude, you're covered for a car accident, but you're not covered if you become disabled by EDS, flat out. It'll just be an exclusion in your coverage, or there will be a pre-existing condition exclusion time period where, if you've been living and working with EDS for 10 years, maybe they will offer you a policy, but it will come with that. That's a pre-existing condition. It will have, you got to be able to maintain working for another year or 2 years or whatever they have, before it becomes a condition that's covered under the policy. So it never hurts to ask, but expect that it's usually not as simple as just handing over your premium and getting covered. Read the policy.
Yeah. Any other questions that the audience has right now while we're here, that they want to ask? You can either put it in the chat or just take yourself off mute and ask away. No. Well, if you come up
Hi.
with one,
Oh,
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, April.
hi. Oh, I didn't know. Oh, I used my real name. Okay. Sorry. You're part of different groups. I was like, how she know I was April? Uh, Hi everyone.
Hey,
Uh,
April.
Hey. I was a little confused because we were talking about policies, so I guess I thought that we were talking about just like general disability, SSI, or is it just that um, the advice that you're giving overlaps with those two things? So if you could clarify that, and then I can ask my follow-up question.
Sure. Yeah, and it's not you. Like this is very confusing in general. Um, there is, if you're working and you've been working, you will be eligible for Social Security disability insurance if you have collectively worked for, I think it's 40 quarters, about 10 years. Um, if you are working for an employer that offers private or group disability insurance, you may be covered by that as well. And uh, if you're eligible for the group insurance from your employer, SSDI will be an offset to that, and they'll reduce your long-term disability benefit from your employer's insurance company by what you make in Social Security disability. So they're all like kind of interconnected. My expertise is primarily in the group disability policies that are provided by employers or through employers. But a lot of because they're so interconnected, I've seen a lot of SSDI claims as well, and a lot of a lot of what you need to do to get your private disability or employer's disability policy to cover you is the same thing that you need to do to prove a claim with SSDI.
I know when I've read the thing about disability, like, will this person be disabled for, I can't remember, is it like 5 years or more or something like that? Or has this person been disabled for at least, those 5 years or so? How would that work in terms of retroactively, or it doesn't work? Because right now I'm going through a couple of months where I feel like better from so question one, how does that work? And then the second question would be, how do I like approach the whole application with all these things that are interconnected, especially when I've had inconsistent medical care because I've had, the inability to get to my appointments.
So for your specific situation, you would probably want to talk to a Social Security advocate, usually an attorney, or like if you contact your local Social Security office, they should have a list of advocates in your area. Doesn't have to be an attorney. There's, I'm blanking on the name of the I think it's NOSCR, it's the National Organization of Social Security Representatives, that they're non-attorney representatives who can take your Social Security case all the way up to a lawsuit. They don't file lawsuits, but most cases are resolved before they get to that point. So that would be the right, Social Security attorney or representative would be the right person to start with about your specific case, and what's available to you and what you should do. In general, like to prove the kind of like as the overall principles to think about, lack of doctor support is going to be really hard, if not impossible, to overcome. But all you need is one doctor who now will agree to look at whatever you have in terms of records, that you will probably have to provide to this doctor. So you'll probably have to go and get all the medical records, from, and probably it's from the last time that you worked, right? If you're talking about like when to date a claim, especially if it's a claim about, being out of work, you want to figure out what took you out of work and find the records that you have from that time. Then get somebody who will look at them and say, yeah, I've looked at April's past history. It's consistent with, her narrative. I find her to be credible. I find that her treatment history supports what she's telling me. And based on my interactions with her and my treatment of her right now, I do not think that she's able to work. And these are the reasons why. And it's, it's things that for major depressive disorder. We've seen things like, she can't get to work like reliably. She's
Oh,
not,
no.
she has good days and bad days, but she can't be, depended on to be there reliably 5 days a week, 8 hours a day. With anxiety, it can be things, it can be like very specific things like, um, she's a customer service representative and she can't talk on the phone because she's emotionally volatile, trying to talk when things are getting stressful, breaks down in tears, whatever the specific symptoms that cause you to be unable to do a job, that's what you need your doctor to document for you. And, say as a result. And then the other important thing, it's always important to have is a treatment plan and a prognosis. Because insurance companies hate to see, and I think Social Security is the same way. Like they hate to see that you've just given up, right? That your doctors have given up, that there's no, and then that was maybe like one of their first things. They just say, well, she's got this condition, whether it's EDS, whether it's mental health conditions, and there's nothing we can really do. Even though a lot of times that's the advice that people get from their doctors, it doesn't translate well into a disability claim. So you need some kind of treatment plan. We're trying this medication. We're trying, this frequency of therapy. And what's the return to work prognosis? We think it's going to take about 6 months for her to get stable on the medication. And then if you get to the 6-month point and you're not there, you're not there. Like insurance companies do understand that. If you can, if your doctor can say, hey, we thought this was going to be a 6-month process. It hasn't worked. We're still adjusting medications. She's not there yet. That is better to try to explain to the insurance company than just sort of this blanket, like, I don't know. We have no time horizon for getting her back to work. And with something like EDS, like, that's really important in the beginning. And then as that goes on and you keep missing the return to work projected dates, then I think it becomes more acceptable for the insurance company, for your doctors to start saying like, look, we've tried everything and this is the new baseline. And we think that is maximum medical improvement. We're going to fight to keep her there, in this range, but it's, going back to work is not something that we're anticipating anymore. But that has to be the end result of a lot of treatment. They want the insurance companies and probably Social Security, like they want all that documented. Like you talked about problems with executive functioning. My mind immediately goes to, neuropsychological evaluation. There are tests that will show you have, and you can be brilliant in all the other areas, but it will show if you have an executive function deficit. If you have short-term memory problems, everything else can be great, but you can have these problems and just on their own, like that will keep you out of work. Executive functioning may not keep you out of work entirely, but it would keep you limited to tasks that are, one step at a time, no multitasking. And, based on your work history, if Social Security says there are no jobs that she can do, that fit this requirement of no multitasking, then that equals disability. Because it's always like a combination of what your restrictions and limitations are and what the job requires. And if there's no overlap there, there's no, it's a disability.
Okay.
So yeah, you want to try to get documented. Matters is, what's going on with you? Why can't, like, and this isn't a rhetorical question, like this is an actual question, like why can't you work? Like what would happen if you got up and tried to go to work? Like what would that look like? Would it look like, I have to take bathroom breaks, every half hour, and they can last, I don't know how long they can last. Whatever that the answer to that why can't you work question is, like how are you going to document that, and how are you going to, what proof can you offer of it, and what doctor support can you have? So if you talk about, conditions like like gastro issues. So that's you putting it in context. That's you telling the story of your claim. Here's why I can't work. And then, you want to draw a line to, what supports that? Can you say, and then, and so I've been seeing a gastroenterologist and I've, seen him 6 times in the past year, and here are the records. Here's what he said about how severe it is. And draw a line between what the context is, what the proof is, and then whenever you can, having a doctor who agrees, like your gastroenterologist says, oh yeah, like this is, she's reliable and credible and would not be able to function in a work environment with these symptoms.
Because connective tissue disorders and this is like 1 week you're okay, the next week you're not, the next month it's so variable. Is insurance companies or Social Security, when they first start looking into your claim, they're going to call you and they're going to interview you. And one of their typical questions is, tell me about a typical day for you. And, like, there's really no such thing, because this day is so much different than that day than the other day, and so how you answer those questions, it becomes really important. Like, okay, well, I can barely get through the shower in the morning, or, like whatever it is. But keep in mind that, they're going to ask you like this little window of time, and you have to kind of help them open the aperture to the idea that, like, one day is one day, and then, they're different all over the place.
That's what we recommend people to do, Christy, is like answer the question that they should be asking you, and not necessarily just the question that they are asking you. So if they're saying, what is a typical day? You can say, well, a typical good day looks like this. I'm able to take a shower, and then, I rest for an hour. I'm able to have breakfast. I may be able to do one or two things in the afternoon. A typical bad day looks like I can't get out of bed. I'm in bed all day long. On average, I will have, 3 good days a week and 2 bad days. And then the other 2 days are kind of in between there. So that's what they should be asking you. And again, it goes back to like the context of your claim. And then if you have a symptom journal that you have then shared with your doctor to support that, now you have proof of this claim.
I hope this was helpful. I know it's frankly one of the hardest jobs you'll ever never want.
Yeah.
And it's so stressful because you're on this edge of, like, if you do get approved, then, like 30 days, 6 months, 90 days, like you're going through this again and again, again, having to prove, and it's so mentally frustrating. But just, you're absolutely worth it. And, if like for me, this happened to me in my late 40s. So it was like, I had worked in the system, I had all the policies, now I have to just spend all this energy trying to prove this. Um, and it's demoralizing. But, when you have people like Ellen, um, and other advocates, I put in the chat, there's a gentleman named John Rodas,
That's great.
that, he's a disability advocate, and he used to be on the board at the Marfan's Foundation, and he's started his own nonprofit called Connective Tissue Coalition. And he's a fantastic resource of, like, how do I navigate this? And what do I say? And, he teaches you simple things. Like, for example, one of my favorite tips that he shares is, when you're talking with your doctor, or when you're talking with your attorney, or, the insurance people, to be able to kind of have this relatable example. Like, okay, you don't feel good every day, but, like, that's pain, or that's anxiety, or this, but he says, like, say to them, or a judge or whatever, Like, have you ever had the flu? Okay, well, most people have had the flu. They know how that is. That's like body aches and, like fevers and inconsistent amount of energy. And you stand up, maybe you're going to pass out, And so, like, for me as an EDSer, this is just an example, like a really bad day is like a bad flu day. And a good day, it's kind of like having a cold. Like, I'm foggy, I'm not great. But like, imagine if you had the flu 3 days a week and a cold 3 days a week and one good day. I mean, that's what I'm dealing with consistently, week after week after week. And so if you have a story or a mechanism to be able to help them kind of understand, um, that's helpful. Thank you so much for your time and energy on, this beautiful Sunday afternoon that you're missing out on over there at 70 degrees for Ellen's book. As she's got some tips.
Yeah, it's mostly about appeals, but it also applies. I'm going to write a sequel about applying for benefits. But for now, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Great. Well, it's so great to have someone like you, Ellen, that like gets EDS and the complexities, so we don't have to like prove to you that this is real. So,
Yeah,
if we get a doctor and a lawyer that can speak our language, it's
yeah,
certainly a big head forward in the battle. So,
yeah.
thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Anything
I really
else?
appreciate everyone's time.
Yeah. Anything else, Ellen? Anybody else want to add? All right. You guys
Okay.
go and have a great rest of your Sunday. Thank you so much.